Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. It is Thursday, April 13th, and I'm coming to you today with better news than last week, and that is that Justin Pearson has officially been reinstated as state representative and sworn in again as of this morning. That means he and Justin Jones, along with Gloria Johnson, or otherwise known as the Tennessee Three, are now all back in the Tennessee state legislature right now. While it's great news, we shouldn't forget that Republicans, what they did to these two Justins, which is they simply expelled them for simply protesting for gun reform. And now that they're back in the state house, they now have a national platform. And I know they will be great voices and they will be strong advocates to reform our nation's gun laws, and specifically in Tennessee. But I know a lot of people still are wondering, what will ever change? Will things ever change? Are we on a better path when it comes to gun reform? We're starting to see some things change. This morning, Governor Whitmer signed a pretty amazing gun reform legislation piece into law, requiring universal background checks as well as safe storage. Is that the beginning? How much more of that should we expect with Republicans controlling power on the national level and also throughout the country? I have the perfect guest to talk with me about this, Fred Guttenberg. He's been an inspiration to me, and I know so many others who are fighting for gun violence prevention. Fred, it's so great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Victor. Hope you're doing all right.
Thank you. Hope you are too. So I want to talk to you about where we are with our nation's gun laws, because it seems like more than ever before, maybe some things are beginning to change, especially after Tennessee. I'm wondering if you see the culture around guns changing at all compared to when you first got involved in this fight.
You know, last night I was on the phone with my daughter, Jamie, who, as you all know, was murdered in Parkland, with Jamie's best friend, who's currently in Northwestern University in the Chicago area. And there was a shooting and people died.
Yeah.
I was on the phone with her during the shooting when she was having trauma related to it and flashbacks and everything else. She's now been affected by a shooting in high school and one in college. That's the bad news, but there is good news, and things are changing, and they have been for a while. And I think they started after Parkland. If you look at the election in 2018, we flipped the House of Representatives, and we did it on this issue. And if you look in 2020, we flipped the Senate, and we elected President Biden, and this issue was a big part of the reason why. And if you look at last year, we passed the Safer Communities Act. We have a real director of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. That's big. Those are big, big, big things. Not enough, but they're big things. But we still have gun violence. And, you know, when you go back to 2018, when Jamie was killed, there were 300 million weapons in America. There's now over 400 million. That's a reality. And so how are we going to fix this? There is a divide between blue states and red states. I call that the real border crisis in America, to be quite honest. Because you have red states that are going in one direction, and then you have blue states, you mentioned Michigan and Governor Whitmer, who are going in another direction. And there's a reason why the murder rate per capita in blue states is declining, and the per capita murder rate in red states is going up. But this week maybe saw a shift, because Governor Lee in Tennessee, a guy who has opposed every measure in the past to reduce gun violence, all of a sudden it affected his family. He felt it personally. And because of it, he wants to do something about it. Now, on the one hand, I'm beyond angered that he wasn't thinking this way before it affected his family. In fact, my anger at that is indescribable, because had he felt this way before, it's possible Tennessee could have already had a red flag law that would have stopped that most recent mass shooting. Better late than never. I'm thankful he is there. I'm thankful he now wants to pursue this and do this. And I hope he is ready to fight the members of his own party in Tennessee who are going to stand in his way.
Yeah, you mentioned Northwestern yesterday, and I come not too far away from that area, and it reminds me of Michigan State University, when you had some people who came from Oxford High School where there was a shooting just months ago and then had to experience the same thing again at Michigan State University.
Yeah.
It's just this crushing and devastating and hopeless reality that feels like, but it does seem like things are changing. You mentioned Governor Lee in Tennessee, where public sentiment seems to be catching on, and he's realized just the impact of this on his own personal life. But my question is, I mean, what will it take for these Republican elected officials in mass to do something about this? Is it going to take them knowing or having something personal like this happen to them? I mean, what will change in their kind of calculus on this issue?
One of two things. A, either they do get personally touched, or B, they get fired. I don't think it's a question of convincing them anymore. You already have 75 or more percent of this country who wants this done. That includes Republicans and Democrats. That includes gun owners and non-gun owners. This isn't an issue of popularity. I think doing something to reduce gun violence is probably more popular than saying, I want to have apple pie. That's not the issue. The issue is those who stand in the way of what the majority of America wants. And we saw what it took for Governor Lee to get rational about this. My instinct is it's going to take firing more and more and more of these Republicans who stand in the way of the will of the majority.
Do you think more people are going to do that in 2024? I mean, what do you think is first the I guess challenge for Democrats in getting people to vote against Republicans on this? And do you think more people are starting to realize, are starting to pay attention to their representatives?
Well, you said the challenge for Democrats. I'm going to flip that a little bit and put the challenge out to voters. Under no circumstances, no excuses, nothing, do you sit home in this next election and not vote. It is that simple. Across the country in the last election, Democrats did okay. But you look at a state like Florida, they did not. And the reason is not that people loved Ron DeSantis and the Republicans in Florida, but his voters showed up. And in Florida, Democrats sat home. Had they not sat home, look, we might still have a Governor DeSantis, but we might not have a supermajority, for the Republicans. And we might still have the House of Representatives in the Congress had Florida Democratic voters voted. So listen, if wanting to reduce gun violence, if wanting to protect freedom of choice for women, if wanting to allow people to love who they love, if wanting to protect the environment, if wanting to do these really important things isn't enough to get you out to vote, I don't blame Democratic candidates anymore. I blame you. Don't sit home.
100%. You hit the nail right on the head. I know you come from Florida and you're in a state where there are many Republicans around you. I'm wondering, in those conversations that you have with Republicans, how do you reach them? How do you get them to care about this issue? Or do you find more people are caring about this issue down in Florida even?
Listen, I try to find a common purpose. So I'm not a gun grabber. I'm not an anti-Second Amendment guy. I hate gun violence, and I make that clear. And as somebody who hates gun violence, I go through what my three objectives are, and I try to at least get us to start by agreeing to that, which is this. I want to lower the gun violence death rate. Most people would say, I want to do that too. I want to reduce the instances of gun violence. Most people would agree with that. And I want to reduce the severity of gun violence injuries when gun violence happens. Most people would want to do that. Once we establish those goals, it's no longer having a conversation from opposing sides of the room. And so that's how I try to reach people. I really just want to stop the next one. That's what I want to do. And so I think there are really big pragmatic things that we can all agree to and do if we can take the heat out of the conversation.
Absolutely. The other big factor I want to ask you about is the NRA's role in all of this, because it has had a chokehold on Republican elected officials for so
Sure.
long. And I mean, in what you've seen over the past few years, do you think their power is weakening? And what will it take for Republicans to stop following their marching orders? Is it voting them out of office?
The NRA's power has weakened,
Mhm.
their financial condition has weakened, but there's a lot of other groups that have been the beneficiary of that who are even more extreme than the NRA.
Mm.
And the real power of the NRA may be in a place where people weren't paying attention and
Yeah.
it's legal. While politically, their power has weakened. Because they saw that coming years ago, they changed strategy to start filing lawsuits,
Mhm.
challenging legislation across the country. We already saw the impact of that in the Bruin case
Yeah.
earlier this year. And that's really consequential stuff. You know, their aim now is to file as many of these lawsuits as possible and continue to get things to ratchet up to the Supreme Court because they have a friendly Supreme Court. So the NRA politically is weakened. The idea of an A rating from the NRA is now toxic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the only rating pins that you see now are Democrats wearing their Fs.
Mhm.
But they still exist. And as
Yeah.
long as they exist, they're dangerous.
Yeah. And you mentioned the importance of voting. For our viewers and listeners watching this and listening to this, do you have any other suggestions on what they can do between now and 2024 to see a better future where there's less gun violence?
Well, number one, become part of the organizing
Mhm.
of other young people. Join the groups that are working to turn out young voters.
Yeah.
Um, and don't let older, more seasoned people like me off the hook.
Mhm.
Demand we vote as well. Because every time I hear someone my age say, I hope the young people show up, we need the young, it's like, no, you know what? We need you too.
Yeah.
And so nobody should be let off the hook. Young voters, you need to show up. You need to continue showing up in record numbers. You need to make sure your parents show up. You need to make sure your aunts and uncles show up, your grandparents show up. And by the way, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, and grandparents across this country, if you don't have enough of a reason to show up, shame on you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it may be your kid that you're burying the next time if we don't take action.
Right. It's truly, I mean, life or death in this situation, and we need everyone to show up. It's an intergenerational effort and an intergenerational fight. So, and Fred, I'm so grateful for your voice. I know so many people are. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thanks, Victor.
Thanks so
Appreciate you.
much. Bye.
Take care.
Well, Fred Guttenberg is always inspiring, and just like he said, the most important thing we can do in 2024 and leading up to 2024 is registering people to vote, telling everyone we know to go out there and vote, and then to actually vote, because this is literally a matter of life or death. This is about whether or not we want to live in a safe society that has dramatically reduced gun violence. This is about whether or not we can live safely, whether or not our children can live safely, whether or not our parents can live safely. We're seeing across the country just the stakes of not acting on gun violence and the consequence of electing Republican elected officials into office. So, for everyone who's out there listening, vote, 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 because that is ultimately how we create the change that we want. And if we don't go out there and vote, you know who is? Republicans. And so we have to show up in huge numbers. And just like Fred said, we need young people to show up, but we also need everyone else to show up too. This is going to take all of us in this fight. It's an all hands on deck moment. Just a couple of other things before I let you go for today. Some things struck my eye. First of all, this morning, like I said, Governor Gretchen Whitmer has signed a really huge gun reform legislation into law. The bills that she signed would first require universal background checks and also safe storage. And remember, this is a state where you saw a tremendous number of young people turn out and vote for Democrats. And I think this is what you're seeing right now is the why elections matter so much. You're seeing Governor Whitmer, and a few weeks ago, she signed a really historic reproductive rights bill that eliminated this 100 years old law that would prohibit women from accessing safe abortions. So she overturned that law. Today, she signed a new gun reform legislation into law. She's showing us why those local and state elections matter so much. If it weren't for state Michigan, which has now a Democratic-controlled governorship, state house, and state senate, we probably wouldn't be in this situation. But it's a testament of why those state and local elections matter so much in America, and why we all must continue doing our part to turn out and vote in those elections. Another thing is there's a new poll that shows some interesting findings. This is by Navigator Research, and Navigator Research finds 100 days into House Republicans controlling office, only 35% of Americans approve of what Republicans are doing. That's down 24% since November of 2021, according to this poll. Americans see right through what Republicans are doing, basically. And other kind of findings that they have, just top line findings. First is they're losing support really quickly, not only just overall, but also on key issues like inflation, guns, Social Security, and Medicare. They ran their entire campaign in 2022 on inflation and the economy. They're doing really bad, and their support is shrinking very fast. And then the second thing that I found interesting about that poll was that American voters and the respondents are rejecting extremism and MAGA more than ever before. We saw this in 2022 when a historic number of people turned out and voted against MAGA Republican candidates. People basically just want normalcy. And I think that's what we're seeing in polls and also elections. People don't want to see people like Lauren Boebert or George Santos or Jim Jordan or Marjorie Taylor Greene ruling the show. They just want people who are competent and will actually respect the office that they hold, not people who will cause chaos and attack people without any basis. And I think that's what we're seeing across the country right now. So that's some important stuff. A couple of other things before I let you go. First is Dianne Feinstein now. There's been calls for her to resign because she hasn't shown up to 60 out of her 82 votes this year. Yesterday, she told Chuck Schumer that she wants him to temporarily replace her with another Democrat on the Judiciary Committee until she recovers from shingles. I think that's a good solution. Is it enough? I'm not sure. I initially called her to resign, but I do think it's a good move for her right now because it seems like the biggest kind of challenge for Democrats with Dianne Feinstein out is actually confirming judges and justices onto benches and judicial vacancies. And so with Dianne Feinstein now off of the Judiciary Committee, Dick Durbin can appoint a new Democrat onto that committee. And basically now we can get back into the process of confirming judges, which I think is going to be really important for President Biden's agenda and also his legacy. So I think that's a good thing. Resignation might not come soon, but at least we have a Judiciary Committee that can confirm those judges and justices in a timely order. The last thing I have for you is some new drama out of Fox News. Last night, Alex Wagner had exclusive video, or I guess audio testimony and tapes between Fox News executives and Trump officials. One tape basically showed Team Trump literally admitting that there were no physical issues with Dominion machines. And the quote was, Trump campaign officials saying there weren't any physical issues with Dominion machines. They try to go off the record. There were still tapes, and this is just on the surface of what we know about what's between Fox and Dominion. There's probably some really bad stuff out there, and today's the start of that Fox Dominion trial. So I know all of our eyes will be on that. I'll be covering that. You don't want to miss that. There's going to be a lot to talk about. But just like James Comey once said, Lordy, are there tapes? And it seems like this is just the beginning for the bad news for Fox. And this is all, it's good news for democracy. So we'll be paying attention to that in the coming days. And definitely stay tuned for that, because I suspect that Fox is about to go through some pretty tough things. That's all the news I have for you today. It's definitely been a crazy and chaotic news week with the Tennessee, with Fox, with Trump, with Alvin Bragg, with Tennessee. I mean, it's just all been so chaotic and crazy, but I'm grateful for all of you for tuning in and staying in this fight. It's definitely not going to get any less chaotic, I think, in the years and the months to come heading into 2024, but I'll be here, and I'm grateful for your voice. Be sure to tune in every morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/ youtube.com/Politicon. And be sure to share with anyone who you might think this is interesting. We try to bring on interesting guests and also give you a perspective of Gen Z and young people. So tune in every day at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time. Tomorrow, I'll be back with Fred Wellman to talk about the craziness from Republicans. He's been a very, very effective and strong advocate for anti-Republican causes and also just Democratic causes. So you don't want to miss that. We have a lot to talk about, and we'll be back tomorrow again at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. Don't miss it. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Thursday.